In this video we're going to be pottering about with making red watercolour shadows. So let's get a cup of tea and make a start. Welcome back to my regular viewers, and if you're a new subscriber please click the little red square at the bottom right of this screen and the little grey bell so you'll always get an alert when I put a new video up. If you'd like to learn how to perceive, proceed and paint like an artist, watch my videos regularly and little by little you'll improve as the time goes by. So let's get on with painting our red watercolour shadows. This is my setup ready to mix red shadows. So I've got my palette, a rag for wiping my brush, I've got a 1-inch flat watercolour brush for stroking colour on, but you can use any brush you like, then a pen for making notes of my colour mixes. Then I've got a cool red, which is alizarin crimson. Then I've got green, which is hooker's green. Then I've got a mid-value red, which is cadmium red deep. And then I've got its complement, which is cobalt turquoise. Then I've got a warm red, which is cadmium scarlet. And then a blue to mix with that is Winsor blue green shade. In the description I'll list all of these paints and where you can get them. And I'll also give you a list of mid-reds, warm reds and cool reds so that you can continue to explore and play with red shades after this video is finished. I've also got 2 jugs of water ready for swilling out my watercolour brushes and a box of tissues for wiping down my mixing area because it's nice to keep everything clean, and a flannel for wiping my brushes. So I shall see you back in the next clip. So for experimentation and for ease of you seeing these colours on my palette today, I haven't put my paints in the wells. I've just put a blob of each red in the middle of the palette. So there's alizarin crimson, cadmium red deep and cadmium scarlet. So let's start by just putting a block of this colour on a piece of paper so that we can then get ready to mix the shadows. So I'm wetting my brush with clear water. Let's start with the mid value, the mid red, which is cadmium red deep. This is a very strong and clear red. So I'm going to paint a rectangle of that on my watercolour paper. Any watercolour paper will do for this. So let's just give my brush a rinse in the water. And that's my cadmium red deep. Then the next colour to mix, we'll go for the warm red. Now this red has got a little bit of orange in it. This is a great red for mixing, you know, for painting poppies and anything with a really sort of hot red look to it. As you can see when it goes on, it's got a definite different hue than this pure red. Doing exercises like this is really good because you get to know the colours and their qualities. And I'll rinse my brush again. And then we'll move on to the last red, which is a cooler red. This is alizarin crimson, and it's cooler because there's a little bit of purple in it. And we'll soon see when we paint this on how very different this red is. So as you'll see, not all reds are the same. Okay, so we've got our 3 reds there. Cool red, mid red and warm red. I'm going to rinse my brush really well because I don't want any colour to contaminate another colour. And then I'm going to add the names. So alizarin crimson, cadmium red deep, cadmium scarlet. I'm just going to let these dry now. You can give them a little hair dry if you want to, just for this exercise. But I wouldn't recommend hair drying watercolours in general because it does dull the brilliance of the colours. See you back in the next clip. today's video I want to introduce you to the Quiller colour wheel, which is what I've been using for the last 25 years. He really explains the Winsor & Newton colour range, which is what I use, very well, explaining what colours are complementary, analogous, etc. So here's the Quiller colour wheel. This is one I printed off the computer, but I've actually got one that came with a book I had years ago. I'd recommend either buying this one online, the link for it is in the description below, or you get his book, and then the colour wheel is in the back of the book, which is quite big. It's an A3 size. So I've been using this for a very long time, and basically how it works is, if you want to mix shadows for reds, you look at the red that you've got, let's say alizarin crimson, and you find it on the colour wheel. And then you take a direct route. So let's start with that mid-red, the cadmium red deep. Our complement on the colour wheel, the best one that I had, was cobalt turquoise. So I'm going to get some red going. I've added some water to it, and I'm going to touch in using the corner of my brush and just bring some of that cobalt turquoise in. As you can see, it's toning that red down, it's making it really nicely dulled, but without losing too much of the red. You can still gauge the red because it's still on the palette. So I'd say do this for practice. Leave some of your red on the palette while you're mixing the complement and see how dark it goes. So let's stroke some of that on now. And this will be our shadow on the cadmium red deep. Let's move on to the next one. Let's go for the warm red, which is cadmium scarlet. So again, I'll activate some more cadmium scarlet with a little bit more water. And with this phthalo blue, this Winsor blue, is very strong. So you only need a tiny little bit. Work in small, fine increments. You see that dulled it down already? Because this is a bully, this blue. And then you get in a shadow colour there. Obviously, if I kept on adding blue, it would get darker and darker and darker. So you can try out and see how dark the shadow is for your needs. Alright, so there's the shadow there. And finally, we work the shadow on the alizarin crimson. Again, the alizarin crimson opposite, the best one, the closest one I had was Hooker's green. I didn't have the exact one, but let's try this green and see what it gives us. There we are. That's beautifully shading that red, isn't it? And again, the more of this complement you add, the darker it's going to go. But when you're learning about shades and colour mixing, I would say just go slowly and simply. Get to know whatever colours you've got on your palette very well first. And there are our 3 shadows. And once more, let's write down what we used so that we can remember. So Hooker's green, you can use Hooker's green light or dark. Then I've got cobalt turquoise. If you want, you could also put a dab of each colour of your complement on your colour chart. Okay, so Winsor blue, and I put green shade. So basically, that's a way to add shadows to various types of red. Your mid-red, also called a pure red, your cool reds and your warm reds. Again, check the description for a list of other cool reds, mid-reds and warm reds, because there's lots of different manufacturers and lots of different shades. And I'll put some other helpful links to a website that gives you details on warm and cool colours. If you're really into colour theory, you could go to the Winsor & Newton website and you can print off their colour chart. As you can see, it starts off with the coolest yellow, and then the yellows get warmer and warmer and warmer. Then they merge into oranges, then the oranges get warmer and merge into reds. And then the reds go down into magentas then and purples and start to get cooler, and then they turn into blues. and the blues eventually turn into greens, and so on. So by looking at this, you can get an idea of how cold or warm something is. So for example, cadmium scarlet there, cadmium red deep there, and alizarin crimson there. So you can see that that is a coolish red because it's moving away from the central one there, which is cadmium red deep. And this is a hotter red, cadmium scarlet, because it's moving towards the orange. So this is the idea of the colour wheel. Wherever your colour is on the wheel, you can always tell if it's moving towards a warmer colour or a cooler colour. So thanks for watching, and if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe by clicking the little red square on the bottom right of your screen, and then if you click the grey bell as well, you'll always get an alert when I've got a new video coming up. Thanks for watching. One last thing, when you clean up your paints, clean them up quickly, especially if you're using a plastic palette, because colours like Windsor Blue are deeply staining, and if you don't wipe them off, you know, before they dry, or if you leave them on there too long, they will stain. So I would get that phthalo blue off there with some tissue and just get that off straight away, because it can ruin your palette. In general though, I wouldn't leave colours in the middle of the palette, I would take them off. So what I'm going to do, rather than waste any more of these colours, I'm going to take a piece of scrap watercolour paper and just paint the colour on, and then at a later date I might do a drawing on that piece of watercolour paper that's been painted and make a card out of it or something. So don't leave your colours in the middle of the mixing area is what I'd say. It's okay to leave them in the wells because they live there for weeks and months anyway. Okay, so see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.